I felt very compelled this morning to start off with what's happening in current events. And I hope you'll chime in and contribute and share your feelings about what's going on, because it's horrific. We were just coming out of a pandemic. I can never pronounce it. Okay, COVID-19. And now a gentleman was killed. And now there are riots and looting all over the country and even in some parts of the world. And it's insane and it's crazy. So my question to all of you and to myself, I was thinking about this a lot. What is our attitude? What is our response? How do we deal with this? What do we tell our children if we have young children or even adult children? How do we deal with what's going on? And as Jews and as Americans, as citizens of this country. So before I begin my thoughts, I wanted to ask you if anybody here wants to share anything. What are you feeling? What are you thinking about what's going on?
It's important that, I think it's important that our children understand that even though they see violence and the uprisings on TV, that you have to be able to stand up for what you believe in and not feel repressed. Like our ancestors did. We couldn't open our mouths and say something. We had to just do because we're in the minority. But now we have a chance to say what's important and change things. Even though it's ugly, it's not pretty to watch, but it has to be done. It's an injustice, the same way we've been done injustices.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So you can't be a dictator and throw troops into the streets. That's wrong.
Yeah.
Celia, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I agree with Carrie, definitely. And I also think it's a sad thing to have to say, but that this was a policeman who did this, and that unfortunately there are a lot of good people everywhere in every job, and then there are some that are not good and bad people, and that we can't, we're taught as kids, we have them come into the classrooms and talk to us, and we're supposed to respect policemen, and whatever they say we're supposed to do. And unfortunately, not all people are treated the way they should be sometimes by law enforcement and people we need to trust. And it's a hard thing to try to figure out sometimes, because it's very confusing, especially with kids. So how do you know to disobey, not disobey, but you have to know what's right and wrong. And that is that everybody deserves to be treated with respect. And, I think this is one of the hardest parts of this whole thing.
I'm sorry. I have to say something.
Go ahead, Kim.
Yes, as Jews, we are not taught to riot. There was a lot of anti-Semitic attacks this year, and we had a very peaceful protest. We have been one of the most racially attacked religions, and as people, we do not act like this, and it is embarrassing. We are not animals. People do not act like this, and it's bringing our country down, and I am so in favor of using force by the government. Yes, we're not a dictatorship, but when our people act like lawless animals, it is our right and duty to protect what is out there and what is ours. But it's a shame on America for all of us to feel this way if we don't. I mean, this country's going down. I'm sorry.
But I don't think that it is the majority of the people that are acting lawless, that are looting and so forth. It's not the majority. If you saw in Lafayette Park, they were peaceful. They were not.
You can have peaceful protest. Okay, that's fine.
And then Trump and push everybody out of his way so that he could have a photo op with a Bible in front of the church and stand there. What was that all about? Why did he need to do that? Okay. Send sparks into these peaceful people that weren't doing anything. They were quiet.
I have to be honest. Trump, I feel, does have a little rough demeanor sometimes. Okay. But you know what? In his heart, he has Jewish grandchildren and a daughter, and he is only out for the goodness of our people.
I don't think don't think he has any sympathy in his heart.
I
at
don't
all.
care what he has. I don't think
Yes,
Obama had it either. But
Oh,
you
I
know
think-
what? He's
oh,
doing
yes,
a great
he
job.
did. Oh, yes,
Okay.
he did.
What did he do? What did Obama do?
When
So you know what?
happened,
You know what?
he talked to all the parents.
Let's put the debate on the table for a few minutes and go back into.
I'm not
Let's go
trying
back-
to be
No.
obnoxious, and I want to
I
have a nice
understand.
discussion with everyone, you know? But our future of the United States is really spiraling out of control.
And
I
think
know
it's
I'm
under his
I know
watch.
I'm leaving to Israel, so I'm
And
fine.
And I know it's under his watch for the last 3.5 years that he has let it go.
Okay, but
way
it's been
by
stemming this
dividing
way
everybody.
under Obama. Obama has delegitimized our police, so their hands are tied. He's demilitarized our whole military. He is
Not
not. Yes.
true.
Okay.
Not
Look
true.
into your
If-
facts.
Okay, so good morning, Diane. So not to be, no, God forbid, we want to hear everybody. Can we start, like, let's take a step back or a step forward? Does everybody agree? Good morning, Diane. Diane,
Good morning.
we decided to start a little bit about current events. What our perspective on what's happening, not my perspective. I'm going to share things from the Torah. I'll tell you when it's the opinion of the man. So I always feel when there's crisis, tragedies, horrific events, you have to go into the Torah. You have to go into our history, and boy, do we have a long history of anti-Semitism, persecutions, killings, attacks, riots against us, and see how do we deal? What can we learn? How do we deal with the current crisis? And the answer is, how did we deal with past crisis? And what is God's wisdom that helps us through these times, these terrible times, whether it's the pandemic, I finally got it right, pronouncing, or what recently just happened, the killing of a Black American, and then the looting, the riots, and the crowds that are just out of control in dangerous situations. My kids told me in Brooklyn, 8 p.m., they have to be in their apartments. They cannot leave. So I want to share a few of things that I thought about, looked into. I'll start with the most recent. Do you remember in 1991, there was the Crown Heights riots? You know I'm from Crown Heights. Crown Heights is at the edge of Park Slope in Brooklyn. It's the Chabad community. And the Rebbe was coming home from the cemetery where his father-in-law is interned and is resting, and where the Rebbe would go frequently to pray for everybody. Like I always say to you, I put your name in by the Rebbe's resting place. And the Rebbe was driving, and there was a car that always accompanied the Rebbe behind the Rebbe, like an escort. And the Rebbe went through the light, and they missed the light, and they zoomed through, and the car went out of control and killed, unfortunately, a young Black boy, Gavin Cato. And the driver was cleared of all criminal acts. They declared it an accident. But riots, terrible, terrible riots broke out in Crown Heights. Terrible. To the extent that a young Australian man, a young man was walking in Crown Heights, and a group of Black Americans grabbed him and stabbed him to death. And they finally brought the criminals to justice after many, many years. And this was going on. And Dinkins basically told the police to stand down. My father and mother kept me in the house and said, don't go out. And when it was a little quieter, and by the way, it wasn't local Black Americans who were doing the rioting and the looting and the killings and the attacks. It was Al Sharpton bust in groups of terrorists to do all the attacks. So it wasn't even local. My mother's neighbors were not attacking our home. It was bust-in people. So Dinkins came to the Rebbe for $1 during all this stuff going on. And he says to the Rebbe these words, Rebbe, please give me a blessing that all the different people and groups should make peace. So the Rebbe responded to him, and I want to build on the Rebbe's response. The Rebbe says to him, hands him $1, and he says, Mayor Dinkins, one people under one nation, under, what does it say? Under one God. This is what the Rebbe told Dinkins. One nation, one people. Under one nation, under one God. This is the pivotal foundation of the entire universe. Our founding fathers in the Constitution, what did they write? All men, but now we say all people, are created equal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who remembers the words of the Constitution?
Yes.
Under one creator. So the founding fathers of America built the Constitution of America under one people created equal, under God, one creator, one God. When God created the universe, there was no Torah yet. There was no 10 commandments. God gave Adam 6 commandments we call them the Noahite laws. And after the flood with Noah, God added a 7th. And I want to read you these 7 commandments that God gave the entire universe. And these 7 Noahite laws are not Jewish laws, are not Christian laws. They're universal laws for all mankind. And this is the foundation of the universe.
I never heard of these.
7 Noahite laws.
7 Noahite laws?
Noah, like Noah, Noahite.
Noah law.
Noahite laws.
Okay.
And these are, again, laws that for all mankind. For all mankind. Within the 7 laws, there are, of course, more nuances. And I want to read them to you because they're so beautiful. The first one is belief in one God. That there's only one God, creator of the universe. Why is this so important? Because if you know that there is a creator, there's accountability. It's not like, this is a coincidence. This is an accident. This just happened. No, there's a creator that runs the world, and we are accountable to that creator. And also, God created all of us, which means if you hurt somebody, it's not only a crime against the person you hurt or killed or looted or maimed. It's a crime against God because it's God's creation.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is don't curse. Don't use God's name. Don't curse in the name of God. And the third one is don't murder. Don't kill. Don't kidnap. The fourth.
What's the difference between don't curse in the name of Hashem or don't use God's name in vain? I mean, like,
that's the same thing. Actually, I was just going to, you're right. Don't use God's name in vain.
Okay.
Which means don't misrepresent, and a typical terrible example is the Arabs, that they claim it's the will of Allah, their God, to kill people who are of a different faith. That's what it means. Do not curse God. Do not use God's name in vain. Don't say, oh, God told me to kill. God told me to maim. I had a vision. Really? You had a vision? If I had a vision, you know how to kill or maim. You know what I mean? The third we said is do not murder, do not kidnap. The fourth, do not eat a living animal, which is animal cruelty. This is the one that was added after Noah, because if you recall in our history, Adam was a vegetarian. Later on, after the flood, when mankind had to work the land, God gave them permission to ritually slaughter animals gently, not unnecessarily, and eat animals. Fifth, do not steal. Don't take what's not yours. 6 is marriage. Do not commit adultery, incense, rape, and the institution of marriage between 2 half souls, a man and a woman. Marriage is a godly institution. I always say, one couple came to me, they say, why do you want to even get married? Oh, everybody gets married. I say, why? Why not live together? It's much easier. Anytime you can move out, because marriage is established by God. God said, if you want to marry, if you want to live with your other half, your other soul, meet your soulmate, you get married under a chuppah, kiddush, and sanctity. So marriage is God created the concept. No human being would be able to come up with such a prosperous idea. By the way, today's my anniversary. I'm
Happy
married
anniversary.
41 years.
41 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
41?
Beautiful.
Yes, yes.
Mazel tov.
Mazel tov.
Thank
Mazel
you, thank
tov.
you.
Mazel tov.
And the last one is beautiful: to establish justice and courts of law. The universe must have justice and courts of law. So these are the 7 Noahite laws. And again, in each one of them,
What is it? Universe must have what?
Courts of law, justice, courts of law.
Yeah, cool.
Yes, the foundation of the world is the justice system. You cannot run amok. You cannot do whatever you want. There's a justice. Do you remember when O.J. Simpson was freed, and and of course, the certain communities celebrated, other communities were appalled by the situation.
No one talks about the Declaration of Independence anymore.
Exactly. So now I want to go a little bit deeper about this, what's happening, and does anybody want to add anything now? So you see the direction I'm taking now, and it's a little bit about what Kim touched upon, that when you have a terrible situation, when you have crisis, we have to go into the Torah, which, remember, I told you is the blueprint of the universe and God's wisdom, and see how do you deal with these kind of situations. But even more than just even going into Torah, go into the history of the Jewish people from the beginning of time. Cain gets jealous of Abel and he kills him. Why? Because God accepts Abel's offering and not Cain's, because Cain's was a wounded animal and Abel gave the beautiful of the fruit. So you have crisis from the beginning of time, unnecessary killings. Now fast forward, the Jews are slaves for 210 years. 210 years, right? 210 years. Look what happens to them. They come out of Egypt. It was not only a physical freedom. They were freed from shackles. They were psychologically freed. 210 years, you're a slave. You know what that means? And then what happens? They come to the Reed Sea, and now they go, what are we doing? So they broke into 3 factions, 3 groups. One group says, let's fight the Egyptians who are coming to take us back to Egypt. Let's war. The second one said, let's surrender. Let's go back to slavery. Otherwise, we're going to die. The third group said, let's pray. We need spiritual entities. And the fourth group said, let's commit suicide. We're never going back into slavery. Moses doesn't know what to do, so he says to God, what should we do? Which one of these 4? So God calls out to Moses one word, Vayisu. 4. None of these 4. I never told you anything other than go forth. I kept telling you, go forth. Your destiny is to go forth. So the first guy, Nachshon ben Aminadav, listens and he jumps into the water. And what happens to the water, everybody? It splits, and they go forth. So when there's a crisis, we came out of slavery. We're being chased by the Egyptian army. There's a huge ocean in front of us. We have children, babies, pregnant women. What do? Do you take war? Do you riot? Do you loot? Do you surrender? Do you kill yourself? Or do you stand and pray? Maybe we should pray all the time, you know? God says none of those. Vayisu, go forth. You have to move forward. And moving forward is the secret of survival. It's the secret for every human being on earth. That we are not defined by tragedy. We're not defined by death. We're not defined by the Holocaust. We're not victims, ever, ever. That's why after the Holocaust, people asked, and people still ask Holocaust survivors, do you want to take revenge? Do you want to go and kill a few Germans? And they go, I have my revenge. Well, what's the revenge? Come here. And they'll take out a photo album And pictures of children and grandchildren who are named after those that perished in the Holocaust. That's us. Yisu. Go forward. Do not let tragedy, pain, suffering, illness define you and turn you into them. No, we are not going to go search for Germans and shoot them in the head, even though we want to. We're going to move forward, and our revenge will be that we will flourish. And that's why it says that the more the Jews were oppressed in Egypt, the Torah says the more they will flourish, they thrive. It's so crazy. The more they were persecuted, it said you have to kill your sons when they're born. You have to give up your daughters for adoption. It says the Jewish people thrived and had even more children. What's going on over here? You're oppressed. You practice birth control. You hide out. The Jews grew and grew and grew, all because of the Jewish women. Another discussion. So what is our answer? Our answer is we have to always move forward. And I told the story a while back. The Dalai Lama, was exiled from Tibet. So he called a group of rabbis a few years ago. He says, what's your secret to survival? How have the Jewish people were persecuted, evicted, killed, maimed, the first temple destruction, the second temple, the Crusaders, the Spanish Inquisition. We have a history of pogroms and killings and police attacking us. How did you survive? You don't even have a homeland. You're spread out all over the world. And what did they say?
Torah.
Our Torah, but even deeper, our soul is our homeland. God is within us. So wherever we are, that God is wherever we are. That's our secret, that we were created in divine image with a mission and purpose. And we are accountable, and we're here for a reason. And we are defined not by what everyone around us does, but by what God tells us. You ever heard of Viktor Frankl? He wrote the famous, he was Sigmund Freud's student. Mm-hmm. He wrote the book, many books, but let me just remember the name of the book.
Can you go over,
sorry,
can you go over that quote again? We are not defined by what'd you say?
We're not defined by circumstances and by people around us, but who we are. We are not victims of circumstances. That is the secret. When you're a victim of circumstance, means you're always dependent on what's happening, whether it's good or bad. Oh yeah, now this life is amazing. Yes. Whatever thing. My husband got a great business deal. I was just promoted.
Right.
If your whole life and success and happiness is dependent on exterior, materialistic happenings in your life, then you're always catching up. You're always reacting instead of leading. A very, very wealthy couple came to the Rebbe for Yechidus. I love the story because it touches me because I try to learn from these things. And they came in with their children, and they spoke and asked for blessings. And then the children left, and the husband, the wife is a high-powered CEO in a huge company, very big company. If I tell you, you would be blown away. She says, Rebbe, I have a big problem. I have everything. I'm wealthy. I'm on the board of very many companies, and I volunteer, and I have everything. Healthy children, a wonderful husband. I'm not happy. So the Rebbe said to her, "You have to do a little. Do you do mitzvahs every day? You say a prayer when you wake up?" And she says, "Rebbe, I have no time for prayers. When I retire from my job, which is very, very time-consuming, trust me, I'll pray every day." So the Rebbe said, no. If you say a little prayer every day, if you connect to your soul every single day, instead of life controlling you, you will be controlling life. You will be in control. So when you wake up in the morning and you say, thank you, God, for giving me back your soul, you're taking back your identity. You're no longer defined by, look what happened. My husband forgot to pick up the cleaners, and the kids' lunches aren't made, and forget it, my car has a flat tire. Life is terrible. you're able to jump over all the hurdles because these are just little hitches on the way. So you have to define yourself by who you are, not by what happens around you. And if you could do that, that's the secret to not, and we're not, by the way, we're not minimizing the death of this man. We're not minimizing the cruelty of the policeman, and there should be justice doled out heavily. But are we going to become wild animals, looters, killers, because something terrible happened in our lives and in society? Right. Or are we going to be leaders and go forth and define what society should be like? That we are created in God's image. We have accountability for that. And we can also say we have a history. We cannot, no one is going to accuse the Jewish people, oh, you don't know what racism is. You don't know what anti-Semitism is. You don't know what slavery is. You don't know what persecution, really? We lost a third of our people in the Holocaust, a third of our people. We lost a third of our people. So why I wanted to share with you a little bit about Viktor Frankl is he wrote the book,
Man's Search for Meaning.
Yes, Man's Search for Meaning, and he invented logotherapy, which I want to quote what he says, which is really also what we're talking about. I copied a quote from his book, which I love. He concludes, he's a Holocaust survivor, everybody. He lost his entire family and pregnant wife in the Holocaust. He writes that even in the most severe suffering, the human being can find meaning and thus hope. Those who have a why to live can bear with almost any how, he writes. So if you have a why to live, if you know that you have a mission and purpose, you can deal with anything in your life. Go ahead, Celia, yes.
So yeah, that book is, it's a life changer when you read it. And yes, I'll never forget, and I read it quite a long time ago, but I'll never forget the one story that he tells of a man who was in the Holocaust, and they kept talking about this man was very, very ill, and it's amazing that he even was still alive in the camp. But there was a date, and they said we're going to be free. They're coming. We're going to be free on this date. So the man actually lived to that date, and they weren't free that day. It happened that it was days later, but they didn't come that day to free everyone. The next day that man died because he had it. Remember that part of it? He had it in him that hope kept him alive.
Exactly.
And, you know, but I'll never forget that. I'll never, ever forget that lesson.
It's very, very powerful. So I want to tell you a backstory about Viktor Frankl because this is so relevant. So Viktor Frankl, his whole family died in the Holocaust. He went back to Vienna. He survived, married a Catholic woman, had a child, Gabriella, and was a student of Sigmund Freud and began working on his logotherapy and his books. And he was ostracized, alienated, ridiculed by his colleagues. And he was basically depressed, and he was resigning from his professorship and his university. And a woman, out of the blue, knocks on his door. A lady, Margaret de Costa, she was a former singer in Austria before the Holocaust. She even performed in front of Hitler, Yamach Shemai. He didn't know she was Jewish. And she survived the Holocaust and settled in Detroit, and they called her Mrs. Mozart because she was her youth was so involved in classics and music. She established a lot of musical institutions in Michigan. And she came to the Rebbe to visit the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And when she walked into the Rebbe's office and the Rebbe looked at her, she started to sob uncontrollably, which she had held in for years and years since the Holocaust. Because when looking at the Rebbe, she writes this, she saw in the Rebbe's eyes someone who finally understood her pain and had compassion for her. And she spoke to the Rebbe, and they spoke, and she was a big supporter of Chabad in Detroit. And she said to the Rebbe, I want to go back to Vienna. I really want to go back to my hometown. The Rebbe said, go and do me a favor. I want you to go to this guy, Professor Dr. Viktor Frankl's home, and I want you to give him a message from me. Tell him that I said to persevere, not to give up, because you will prevail. She's like, okay. And she's like very confused. And she goes to the university where he's a professor, and they go, oh no, he resigned 2 days ago. So she finds his house. She knocks on the door, and his wife, who's a Catholic, and there's a big cross in the house, answers the door, and she says, I'm here to see Professor Frankl. So she says, 1 minute. And he comes to the door, and he looks at her like, what do you want from me? Like almost like rudely. She says, well, I have a message from you from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Schneerson. And the Rebbe said to tell you not to give up, because you will prevail. And he begins sobbing like you never knew. She didn't know what hit her. He's crying and crying hysterically. And he tells her, I was just about to give everything up, literally burn my books. And he persevered, and he didn't give up. And his books became bestsellers, translated in 80 languages, 50 languages, all because the Rebbe told him this. We're not talking about how the Rebbe knew and how the Rebbe connects to people, and people have to hear what they have to hear, you know? We discussed how sometimes somebody has to hear something. But later on, when Viktor Frankl died, his wife told people that every day he would lock his door and he would put on tefillin and he would daven. And every Erev Yom Kippur, he would send a check to Chabad of Austria. It was a couple. And they never understood why. Who is this Viktor Frankl? He's married to a Catholic woman. He's sending a check every Erev Yom Kippur. But slowly the story came out. Margaret told the story, and Viktor Frankl told the story, and his wife told the story. So going back to Viktor Frankl's concept was that this is why we survived. This is how you're able to survive, because you have a why in your life. You know that you have meaning and you have purpose and you have a mission. And you're not defined by what happens to you. You're defined by who you are. So if every day we keep in mind, I am created by God. I am necessary. I am needed. I have a purpose that only I can fulfill, and I am accountable. This gives you a clear direction no matter what happens. And this is not something easy. This is not, oh yeah, there's a killing. Let me just say, oh yeah, I have a godly purpose. It's a way you look at life to move forward. Think of also Joseph. Remember Joseph with the multicolored coat? His brothers sold him into slavery. They put him in a pit. They disowned him. He becomes he's put into prison. He's accused by Potiphar's wife. He's put into prison for years. He's taken out. He's become viceroy of Egypt, second in command. Think of it. Second command to the king Pharaoh. His brothers come to Egypt. What would you do? Put them in prison, hang them. You know what he says to them? It's not your fault I'm here. God sent me here. Don't take so much responsibility. I was meant to become here to save the world, and he saves the world, and to save you. What is it? A person has suffered so much is able to look at his brothers without anger and rage and retribution and revenge? Could you do that? Could I do that? I don't know. Maybe you, not me. That's what it is. It's when you look at life from a whole different paradigm and say, you know, God meant me to be here. God meant for me to go through these trials and tribulations so that I can come here. And he's able to forgive. And it's not a fake forgiveness where you really harbor anger deep inside and it kills you every day because you're so angry. He honestly, truthfully forgave them because he saw that God's purpose and mission for him. He did not allow circumstances of his life to define him. He defined his own circumstances. And that is really, in a nutshell, how we deal with our crisis now. Yes, peacefully, you want to demonstrate, but not to be turned into something inhumane and use this as an excuse for your wild beast to come out. There is no excuse. Justice, and justice for all, and equality for all. And no way should you look at another person and feel you're high and mighty in that. Then they're not. Like we discussed a few weeks ago, we are chosen to be what? Chosen to show people this is the way you deal. So everyone, so what we have to have a ripple effect here. Share the 7 Noahide laws. Perpetuate God's vision for this universe. That's what each and every one of us has to do. We have to perpetuate the proper outlook on life. Start with our own family, with our children. There was one great sage who said, I'm going to change the world. After a few weeks, he said, you know what? I'm not going to tackle the world. I'll tackle my state. And then that became difficult. Then he said, I'm going to tackle my town, my village. Then he said, you know what? Let me just work on my family. Yeah. We don't need to solve this second the whole world's problems. Your own family, your own children, your own parents, your children, your friends, your neighbors. That's where you start. And with ourselves. I always try to start with myself. Because really, whatever we do has that effect. Like we always say, that whatever the mother's mood is, that's the mood of the house. Like my kids will say, Ma's in a bad mood, everybody hide. They're right. So the women define the universe. Our homes, our cities, our towns, our states, our world. Our homes are a microcosm of the universe. The Kabbalah says, when it's raining, look into one raindrop, and the whole world is reflected in that raindrop. You look into one home, and if the home is stable, and there's harmony and peace and equity, then the whole world is that way. But if a home is filled with strife and anger and rage and abuse and bitterness, the whole world will be angry and bitter. So if every home becomes a home of peace, love, and goodness, and equity and equality on one nation under God, that means we will define the whole world's perspective, the whole world's view on everything that's happening.
Can you repeat that quote, harmony and peace, the whole world with the raindrop?
The Kabbalah uses an example that when it rains, look into one raindrop. The whole world will be reflected in that raindrop. You look into the raindrop, you'll see the whole universe. You'll see the sun and the moon. And that's an example of every home is a microcosm of the universe. Whatever is it, you want to know, you want to know a community, what a community is like, go open up one door of one home, walk in, see what's going on in the house. And whatever goes on in the house, that's the society you're living in. So every home reflects society. That's why the Torah begins with the letter Bet. Why doesn't the Torah begin with the letter Aleph? I am God. If God is reminding us all the time, He's the one, He's the creator, or He or She is the creator, why doesn't the Torah start with I? Ani Hashem Elokecha. Bereshis. The letter Bet. What else sound starts with the letter Bet? What other Hebrew word? Which means?
The house.
Diana, you're really on the beach, or that's a background?
No, it's a background, and I didn't know it.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
I wish I was there.
It's so relaxing, your background. I love it, Thomas. So bias.
Every trick I can get.
Yeah.
Yes. Shalom bias or bias.
Exactly. Yeah. So bias And even the letter Bet looks like a house a little bit. You know what I mean? It kind of has like walls. The God said, what is the foundation of the universe? The home. Not the shul, but the home. The home is foundation of the universe. That's why you're home every day and not in shul every day. Otherwise, if the synagogue was the foundation of the world, we'd be in shul all day and night. Thank God we're not. We're home. The home is the foundation of the world.
What do you do if you don't always have harmony, peace, and equity in my home? Yesterday there were a lot of fireworks here.
Yeah, by me
and
too.
I have to
Trust
hide
me.
today.
There's a lot of fireworks, you know. And also, I snap at my kids at times, and they say, "Mom, why are you snapping?" And I think to myself, I don't know why. I just felt like it. I give a snap. Like they said, "Are you going to burn the rice again?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm going to burn the rice again."
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff I get.
Yeah,
Exactly.
but Diane, the God is not looking for perfection, so you are entitled to have.
That's good.
God is not looking for perfection, but God is looking for us to always go forward and move forward. Nayisu, go forward, move forward. So a little humor. I was going to put this in part of the parsha, but I'll tell a little joke that maybe we could tie it in. So a rabbi, a narcissist, a millionaire, and a teacher went golfing. Very beautiful golf course. But there's a big problem. Their game is going great. But ahead of them, there's a group of slowpokes. They can't manage to have it together, and they're getting all frustrated. So the golf pro who goes around in the cart sees their frustration. So he goes over them. He quietly says to them, please be patient. I know the group ahead of you was slow, but they're blind. It's a group of blind golf players. So the rabbi says, Ay vey, a bracha on their head. Let me give them a blessing. They should be healthy and successful. And the teacher said, wow, so inspiring. I'm going to share this story with my students. And the millionaire says, yeah, tell them today's game is on me and dinner in the club. All on me. And the narcissist says, they're blind. So why are they taking up golf time during the day? Why can't they play 10 o'clock at night when they don't disturb anyone else? Kim, you're mute. You wanted to say something?
What did it say? What is the last line? It broke up the last line.
The narcissist
said,
they're blind. Why are they playing during the day? Let them play late at night when no one's around. So the Baal Shem Tov says that just as a mirror is a reflection of every human being, in other words, if you have your lipstick is smeared, the mirror is not going to have perfect lipstick. If you tweeze your eyebrows wrong, the mirror will reflect what you really look like. So every person is a reflection of the universe. When you look at the universe and you see kindness, compassion, love, it's because you're kind and compassionate. So that's what you see in everybody. But if you say, he's a goddess, and she's a goddess, and he's a swindler, maybe because you have that in you. So everyone you meet is a goddess. So what we see in the universe, how we perceive the universe, is a reflection of how we look at ourselves, how we truly are ourselves. So also how we look at the world. So I was going to share a little bit about narcissism from this week's Torah portion. There's a whole discussion of narcissism and the Nazareth and so on and so forth. But I just thought this word from the Baal Shem Tov was so beautiful, how you look at the world is how you are. So what you see in the universe is really a reflection of how you see yourself. So before maybe I share one more little tidbit, does anybody want to say anything about what's going on or what we discussed today, or add something, please? I'd love to hear your opinions. What do you think?
Well, I think it's hard to move forward even though we want to, because still sheltering and stuck. There's still a lot of fear, and it's hard to move forward when you have a house full of, it's just, I'm finding it tough.
You're finding it difficult because everybody's home, you're saying.
I move forward. I want to have a good outlook. I want to try to be the one in my household who sets an example and rises above the riffraff. But I'm finding it difficult.
Well, I find in my own situation as I get out, I go out. Even if I go for a drive or a walk. Because
Yeah.
when you go back into the house, you see also, like, you know how the house is messy. I'll use a silly example. But when you go out shopping and you come back in and you see the mess, you're sitting there the whole time. It's so hard to see what has to be cleaned.
Yeah, it's true.
Right? So the same thing, you have to go out a little bit. It's a very simple thing. I'm just sharing from my own life. You know, I feel my house is mobbed. There's nowhere to go. So sometimes I just go out. You know, my kid said, "Ma, we saw you taking a walk and talking to yourself." That's right. I said, I'm very good company.
Good advice.
That's a joke. It's a joke. So sometimes you have to go out of what we call the Dalit Amais to get perspective. Sometimes, you know, you go out. That's why vacations are so good. Why are vacations so good? You come home more exhausted because you come home and you have like a different energy and perspective. Oh my gosh, I feel energized. Now I'm going to tackle all the jobs I never want to tackle, all those little things you hate doing. So stepping out of your comfort zone or your constant gives you perspective a little bit, right? I mean, I think so.
Yeah.
Carrie, what do you want to say? You have something you want to add?
No, not at all. I'm just listening. Nope.
And what about you?
No, I think it's very beautiful what you said, how it's like a reflection in the home and how you see the outside world too. It's very
From the Baal Shem Tov, the Baal Shem Tov says that.
Baal Shem Tov.
Yeah, the Baal Shem Tov, a philosopher, a professor came to the Rebbe. There's so many stories with the Rebbe, like I got blown away. And he says to the Rebbe, "Look, Rebbe, the world is a terrible place. People look nice, they look pretty, but you know what? You start getting to know them, and they're rotten to the core. They're mean, and they're dog eats dog." And the Rebbe said, "What do you see when you walk down a beautiful neighborhood? Beautiful homes, manicured lawns, beautiful cars. Everything looks perfect, right?" And the guy says, "See, Rebbe, you get my point. You agree with me." And the Rebbe says, "And what happens when you take a shovel and you begin digging? Begin digging. What do you see? Dirt." So the professor says, "That's right. That's what I mean. You begin digging." And the Rebbe says, "But what happens if you don't stop digging? You keep digging. What do you uncover? You uncover the natural resources of the universe. Coal and ore and diamonds and iron and copper." So that was Freud's problem, by the way. He didn't dig deep enough. He dug, but not deep enough. Whereas Viktor Frankl really dug. So I want to just conclude with going back to the 7 Noahide laws. A beautiful story happened. Do you remember how they uncovered the Dead Sea Scrolls? This guy, this famous archaeologist, went with a 13-year-old boy at the edge of Jerusalem, and the 13-year-old boy came upon this hidden chamber. What was his name? Gary Barkley or something. And they discovered 1,000 scrolls and 2 teeny silver scrolls. Took them 3 years to unroll because, you know, they're afraid of breaking them. What did they see on these 2 little teeny scrolls? You'll never guess in a million years. The 7 Noahide laws.
Really?
The 1,000 scrolls were everything, the other things, you know? But the 2 silver teeny scrolls were the 7 Noahide laws they uncovered. Back dating to the 6th century. The 6th century, they uncovered these scrolls with the 1,000 Dead Sea Scrolls. So before the Torah, before Sinai, we have the 7 laws, the foundation of the universe, and we can never get away from it. No matter what you say, this is the world. Under one nation, one God, with what does it say? Equality for all.
Indivisible with liberty, yeah.
Liberty and justice for all. The founding fathers knew it. Adam knew it. Noah knew it. From generation to generation, those who sought truth knew that the world cannot exist without purpose, meaning, and acknowledging that there's a creator in this world. And I think if you keep thinking about that and realizing that it's not the solver of everything, but it's the perspective on everything. Everything comes down to that. Everything comes down to that. You know the story with the mirror, another cute story. So a young couple lived in the shtetl. They never saw a mirror. Nobody had a mirror in the shtetl. The young man went on a business trip to the big city, and he's going back to his newlywed wife, and he wants to buy her something. He loves her so dearly. So he goes and he's shocked. He sees in the window of a shop a picture of his father as a young man. Wow, how did they get a picture of my father as a young man? My wife is going to love this. Going to hang it in by our sofa in the house. Beautiful. He wraps it up and comes home, and before she wakes up, he quickly puts it on the breakfast table before he leaves to work. He wants her to be surprised. She unwraps the picture and she sees a gorgeous girl in the picture. She starts crying. He went to the big city. He found himself another woman. He's leaving me. What am I going to do? And she's crying and sobbing. Her mother happens to come by and hears her daughter crying, and she goes in the house. Doctor, what are you crying? She says, what am I crying? My husband went back to the city and he brought me a picture of his mistress. Give a look. He's leaving me. What? Leaving a girl who's as gorgeous as you? Let me see the picture of her. She unwraps and she sees a picture of an old hag. He's leaving you for that old hag? He's Meshuggah. He had nerves down. It was a mirror. It was a mirror. So everyone who looked in the mirror saw. He saw a picture of his father as an old, and it's him. His wife saw a picture of herself, a beautiful woman. Her mother saw herself as an old hag. So a mirror is a reflection of who you are.
It's very funny.
You have to catch on that
Good.
it's a mirror. Everyone thinks it's a painting.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's it called? My mother told me the story. So does anybody want to add anything or say anything? So now you know we can't blame our president for everything. We have to blame ourselves. We are a reflection of the world. It is
Send us
our world.
could you send